of the African savanna, where the golden grass swayed endlessly under the vast azure sky, lay the village of Mwanso. Here, life pulsed to the rhythm of ancient traditions, and the beating of drums echoed the heartbeat of the land itself. It was in this village that Zuri, a young girl of 12, found herself on the cusp of a journey that would change her life forever. Zuri had always been different from the other children in Mwanso. While they were content to play and work within the familiar confines of the village, she yearned for something more. Her dark eyes, flecked with gold, seemed to reflect the very mystery of the savannah, and her quick mind was always full of questions that the elders struggled to answer. "Why can't I go beyond the acacia trees?" she would ask, pointing to the distant horizon where the trees stood like sentinels guarding the unknown. "The savannah is dangerous, child," her grandmother, Bebi, would reply, her wrinkled face creasing with concern. "Our village is safe. Here, you have all you need." But Zuri knew deep in her heart that she needed more than the village could offer. She needed answers to the questions that burned within her, answers that seemed to whisper on the wind that swept across the plains. It was on the eve of her 13th birthday that everything changed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the village gathered for the weekly storytelling. Zuri sat at the feet of Masi, the oldest and wisest member of their community, her eyes wide with anticipation. Masi's voice, though weathered by age, carried the strength of generations as he began to speak. "Tonight," he said, his gaze sweeping over the assembled villagers, "I will tell you the story of the drums of destiny." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the night insects seemed to quiet their song to listen. "Long ago," Masi continued, "when the savannah was young and the animals still spoke to humans, there lived a great drummer named Jelani. His hands could coax rhythms from the drums that made the very earth dance. But Jelani was not content with playing for his village alone. He believed that his music could bring peace to all the warring tribes of the savannah." Zuri leaned forward, her heart beating in time with the story. Jelani set out on a great journey, carrying nothing but his drum and his courage. He traveled for many moons, facing dangers untold. Lions roared in the night, their eyes glowing like embers. Elephants trumpeted warnings as he passed through their territories. But Jelani played his drum, and the animals were soothed by his music. Msi's voice dropped to a whisper, and the villagers leaned in closer. Finally, Jelani reached the sacred mountain where the spirits of the ancestors dwelled. There, he played a rhythm so pure, so true, that the very rocks wept with joy. The spirits were so moved that they blessed Jelani's drum, imbuing it with magical powers. Zuri's eyes widened. She had never heard this story before, and every word seemed to resonate within her. "With this blessed drum," Masi continued, "Jelani returned to the savannah. He played for each warring tribe, and as they listened, their hatred melted away. The drum's magic helped them understand one another, and soon peace reigned across the land." As MC finished his tale, a strange silence fell over the village. It was Bibi who finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Masi, why have you never told this story before?" The old man's eyes, clouded with cataracts but still sharp with wisdom, found Zuri in the crowd. "Because," he said softly, "the time was not right until now." That night, as Zuri lay on her sleeping mat, the story of Jelani and his magical drum played over and over in her mind. She could almost hear the rhythms he had played, could almost feel the power of the music that had brought peace to the savannah. As she drifted off to sleep, she made a silent vow to herself. She would find Jelani's drum, no matter what it took. The next morning, Suri woke before dawn, her mind made up. She quietly packed a small bag with some dried meat, a water skin, and a blanket. As she was about to slip out of the hut, a voice stopped her. "And where do you think you're going, child?" Zuri turned to see Bibi sitting up on her sleeping mat, her wise eyes twinkling in the dim light. I have to go, Bibi," Zuri said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have to find Jelani's drum." To her surprise, Bibi didn't try to stop her. Instead, the old woman reached under her mat and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "I've been waiting for this day," she said, opening the box to reveal a small, round object wrapped in cloth. "What is it?" Zuri asked, curiosity overcoming her urgency to leave. Bibi carefully unwrapped the object, revealing a small drum, no bigger than Zuri's palm. "This drum has been passed down through our family for generations," Bibi explained. "It is said to have been carved from the same tree as Jelani's great drum. It will guide you on your journey." Zuri took the drum with trembling hands, feeling a strange warmth emanate from it. "But Bibi, how will I find my way? I've never been beyond the acacia trees." Bibi smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "Trust in the drum, child, and trust in yourself. The savannah is in your blood, just as it was in Jelani's. Now go before the others wake." With a final hug from her grandmother, Zuri slipped out of the village and into the pre-dawn darkness. As the first rays of sunlight began to paint the eastern sky, she found herself standing at the edge of the acacia grove, the boundary she had never before crossed. Taking a deep breath, Zuri stepped beyond the trees and into the unknown. The savannah stretched out before her, a sea of golden grass swaying in the morning breeze. In the distance, she could see herds of wildebeest and zebra grazing, their forms hazy in the dawn light. The vastness of it all was overwhelming, and for a moment, Zuri felt a pang of fear. But then she felt the comforting weight of the small drum in her bag, and her resolve strengthened. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Zuri began to realize the challenges that lay ahead. The heat was intense, beating down on her with an intensity she had never experienced in the shade of the village. Her water skin, which had seemed so full when she left, was already half empty by midday. It was as she was considering finding shelter from the relentless sun that she heard it. A low rumbling sound that seemed to come from the very earth itself. At first, she thought it might be thunder, but the sky was clear and blue. Then she realized it was drums. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. Without thinking, Zuri began to walk towards it, her feet moving almost of their own accord. As she walked, she pulled out the small drum Bibi had given her. Almost instinctively, she began to tap out a rhythm on it, matching the distant beats. As she played, a strange thing happened. The grass before her seemed to part, creating a clear path. Zuri's eyes widened in wonder, but she didn't stop playing. She walked on, her small fingers maintaining the rhythm on the drum, as she followed the path that seemed to be creating itself before her very eyes. The sun was setting when Zuri finally saw the source of the drumming. In a small clearing stood a circle of massive baobab trees, their thick trunks twisted and gnarled with age. Between the trees, barely visible in the fading light, were figures moving in time with the drums. Zuri approached cautiously. her own drumming fading as she drew nearer. As she reached the edge of the clearing, the drumming suddenly stopped, and all eyes turned to her. An old woman, her dark skin etched with intricate tattoos, stepped forward. "We have been waiting for you, Zuri," she said, her voice as deep and resonant as the drums themselves. Zuri blinked in surprise. You know my name?" The woman smiled, revealing teeth stained red with kola nut. "We know many things, child. We are the guardians of the rhythm, and we have been watching your journey." Zuri's mind whirled with questions, but before she could ask any of them, the old woman continued. "You seek Jelani's drum, do you not?" Zuri nodded, suddenly feeling very small and very far from home. "Then you must learn," the woman said, gesturing to the circle of drummers. "For the drum you seek is not just an object, but a key to understanding the very rhythm of life itself." And so began Zuri's training with the guardians of the rhythm. Days turned into weeks as she learned the complex patterns and rhythms that had been passed down through generations. She learned to play not just with her hands, but with her whole body, her whole being. The drum spoke of the pulse of the earth, the cycle of the seasons, the dance of life and death that played out every day on the savannah. But it wasn't just drumming that Zuri learned. The guardians taught her to listen to the land, to understand the messages carried on the wind and in the rustle of grass. She learned to read the stars, to find water in the driest places, to speak with the animals that roamed the plains. As her knowledge grew, so did her confidence. The shy, questioning girl from Mwanso village was transforming into a young woman filled with the wisdom of the savannah. It was on the night of the full moon, 3 months after she had first stumbled into the guardian's clearing, that the old woman approached Zuri again. "You have learned much, child," she said, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "But the greatest test is yet to come. Tomorrow, you must set out to find Jelani's drum on your own." Zuri felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by excitement. She was ready. She could feel it in her bones, in the rhythm of her heart. The next morning, with the blessing of the guardians and the small drum from Bibi tucked safely in her bag, Zuri set out once more into the savannah. This time, however, she moved with confidence, her steps sure and purposeful. For days she traveled, using all that she had learned to guide her way. She played her drum to part the grass, spoke softly to the animals she encountered, read the stars to maintain her course. And all the while, she felt as if she were being pulled towards something, some unknown destination that called to her very soul. It was on the 7th day of her journey that Zuri saw it, the sacred mountain that Masi had spoken of in his story. Its peak stretched up towards the heavens, wreathed in clouds that seemed to glow with an inner light. As Zuri began the ascent, the air grew thin and cold. The lush grasslands of the savannah gave way to bare rock and scrub brush. Still, she pressed on, driven by a force she couldn't quite name. Near the summit, as the last light of day was fading, Zuri found a cave. The entrance was hidden behind a curtain of vines, but as she approached, a warm breeze seemed to push them aside, inviting her in. The cave was dark, but as Zuri's eyes adjusted, she gasped in wonder. The walls were covered in paintings, ancient images that seemed to move in the dim light. She saw herds of animals, stick-figure humans dancing, and everywhere, the image of a drum. At the back of the cave, on a stone pedestal, sat a drum larger than any Suri had ever seen. Its surface was etched with symbols she recognized from her training with the Guardians, and it seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. With trembling hands, Zuri reached out and touched the drum. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through her body. Suddenly, she could hear the rhythms of the entire savannah, the stampeding hooves of wildebeest, the slow plodding of elephants, the quicksilver heartbeats of meerkats in their burrows. All of it came together in a grand symphony that left her breathless. Understanding flooded through her. This was Jelani's drum, the instrument of peace that had united the warring tribes. But it was more than that. It was a conduit to the very life force of the savannah itself. As the realization washed over her, Suri knew what she had to do. She couldn't take the drum back to her village. Its power was meant for all, not to be possessed by any one person or tribe. Instead, she began to play. Her hands moved over the surface of the drum, coaxing out rhythms that seemed to come from the very core of the earth. As she played, she felt the music spreading out from the mountain, washing over the savannah like a benevolent wave. She played through the night, her music a prayer, a blessing, a promise to the land that had shaped her. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Zuri finally lowered her hands, her heart full and her spirit soaring. The descent from the mountains seemed to take no time at all. As Suri walked, she could feel the change in the land around her. Animals that had once eyed her warily now watched her pass with something like respect. The grass seemed greener, the sky bluer, the very air filled with a sense of harmony she had never before experienced. When she finally reached the Guardians' clearing, she found them waiting for her, their faces beaming with pride. "You have done well, Zuri," the old woman said, embracing her. "You have renewed the blessing of the drum and brought balance back to the savannah." Zuri spent several more days with the Guardians, sharing all that she had learned and experienced. But soon, she felt the pull of home, the need to return to her village and share her newfound wisdom. The journey back to Mwanso seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. As Suri crested the final hill and saw the familiar acacia trees that marked the edge of her village, her heart swelled with emotion. The villagers, spotting her approach, rushed out to meet her. There were cries of joy and relief, tears and laughter. But as the chaos of her return subsided, Zuri noticed a change in her people. They stood taller, their eyes brighter, as if some of the savannah's renewed energy had already reached them. That night, as the village gathered around the fire, it was Suri who sat in the place of honor, ready to share her tale. As she began to speak, she pulled out the small drum Bibi had given her. But now, as her fingers danced across its surface, it produced sounds as rich and powerful as Jelani's great drum. Suri told of her journey, of the Guardians and their teachings, of the sacred mountain and the cave of ancient paintings. She spoke of the great drum and the symphony of the savannah. But more than that, she shared the wisdom she had gained, the understanding that they were all part of something greater, all connected by the eternal rhythm of life. As she spoke and played, Zuri could see the change in her people's faces. The fear and suspicion of the unknown melted away, replaced by a sense of wonder and connection to the world around them. In that moment, Zuri understood the true power of Jelani's drum. It wasn't the physical instrument that brought peace, but the knowledge it imparted, the connection it created between all living things. From that day forward, Mwanzo village was transformed. No longer did they hide behind the acacia trees, fearing the savannah beyond. Instead, they embraced their place in the great dance of life, becoming true children of the land. And Suri, the girl who had once been filled with unanswerable questions, found that she had become the one with answers. She became a teacher, a leader, a keeper of rhythms both old and new. Children would gather at her feet, just as she had once sat at Masi's, eagerly drinking in the wisdom she shared. But Suri never forgot the great drum in the mountain cave. Each full moon, she would slip away from the village and make the journey to the sacred mountain. There, she would play the drum, renewing its blessing and ensuring that the harmony of the savannah remained strong. As the years passed, Zuri watched new generations grow, teaching them the rhythms of the land and the wisdom of the drum. And though she grew old, her eyes never lost that spark of gold, that reflection of the mystery and magic of the savannah. For Zuri had learned the greatest lesson of all, that life itself was a great, unending song, and every heartbeat, every footstep, every breath was a part of that eternal rhythm. And as long as there were those who remembered to listen, to play, and to pass on the knowledge, the drums of the savannah would never fall silent. As Suri entered her twilight years, she began to think about her legacy. She had lived a full life, had seen the savannah through seasons of plenty and times of drought, had guided her people through challenges and celebrated their triumphs. But she knew that her time as the keeper of the rhythms was coming to an end. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Zuri called her granddaughter, Amani, to her side. Amani was a bright-eyed girl of 12, with the same spark of curiosity that Zuri had possessed in her youth. "Amani," Zuri said, her voice now soft with age, but still carrying the power of the drum. "It's time for you to learn the final secret of the savannah." Amani's eyes widened with excitement. She had grown up listening to her grandmother's stories, learning the rhythms of the land. But she knew there was still much to discover. Zuri reached into a small pouch at her waist and pulled out the small drum that Bibi had given her so many years ago. Despite the decades that had passed, the drum looked as if it had been carved yesterday, its surface still gleaming with a faint, otherworldly light. "This drum," Zuri explained, "has been in our family for generations. It is a key, a guide, and a teacher. It led me on my journey many years ago, and now it will lead you." Amani took the drum with reverent hands, feeling a strange warmth emanate from its surface. "But where will it lead me, grandmother?" she asked. Zuri smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "That, my child, is for you to discover. The savannah calls to each of us in different ways. You must listen with your heart and follow where it leads." Over the next few weeks, Zuri taught Amani everything she knew about the drum, the rhythms, and the secrets of the savannah. She spoke of the guardians of the rhythm, of the sacred mountain, and of the great drum that brought harmony to the land. As the days passed, Zuri could see the change in her granddaughter. Amani's movements became more assured, her eyes more focused, as if she were listening to a song that only she could hear. Finally, on the night of the full moon, Zuri knew it was time. She led Amani to the edge of the village, to the very spot where she had begun her own journey so many years ago. "Remember, Amani," Zuri said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The drum is not just an object. It is a connection to the very heartbeat of the earth. Listen to it. Trust in it. and it will never lead you astray. With tears in her eyes but determination in her heart, Amani hugged her grandmother one last time before stepping beyond the acacia trees and into the vast expanse of the savannah. Zuri watched her granddaughter's form disappear into the moonlit night, feeling a mixture of sadness and pride. She knew that Amani's journey would be different from her own, filled with its own challenges and revelations. But she also knew that the wisdom of the savannah, passed down through generations, would guide her. As she turned back towards the village, Zuri felt a sense of completion. She had played her part in the great rhythm of life, had added her own unique beat to the eternal song of the savannah. Now it was time for a new generation to take up the drum and continue the melody. In the days that followed, life in the village continued as it always had. Children played, adults worked, elders shared their wisdom, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation, a sense that something momentous was on the horizon. Zuri spent her days sitting at the edge of the village, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. She knew that Amani's journey, like her own, would not be measured in days or weeks, but in the growth of spirit and the expansion of understanding. Seasons changed. The short rains came and went, turning the savannah into a lush green paradise before the dry season returned, painting the landscape in shades of gold and brown. Through it all, Zuri waited, her faith unwavering. It was on the eve of the following year's full moon that Zuri felt it. A change in the air, a shift in the very rhythm of the land. She stood up, her old bones creaking in protest, and made her way to the village center. As the moon rose, casting its silvery light over the savannah, a figure appeared on the horizon. The villagers, sensing something significant, gathered around Zuri, their eyes fixed on the approaching form. As the figure drew closer, gasps of recognition rippled through the crowd. It was Amani, but not as they remembered her. The girl who had left was now a young woman, her eyes shining with wisdom beyond her years, her steps sure and purposeful. But Amani was not alone. Behind her came others, people from distant villages, some from tribes that had long been enemies of Mwanzo. And interspersed among the humans were animals. A majestic lion padding silently, a wise old elephant swaying gently, graceful impalas and lumbering wildebeests, all moving together in harmony. As Amani reached the edge of the village, she began to play the small drum. The sound that emerged was unlike anything the villagers had ever heard. It was the voice of the savannah itself, a melody that spoke of unity, of connection, of the unbreakable bonds between all living things. One by one, the villagers began to join in, clapping, singing, adding their own unique rhythms to the growing symphony. The visitors, both human and animal, added their voices as well. Soon, the entire savannah seemed to be pulsing with the beat, the very stars in the sky appearing to dance to the rhythm. Zuri watched it all with tears in her eyes, her heart swelling with joy and pride. She understood then that this was the true power of the drums of the savannah, not to bring peace to warring tribes, but to remind all living creatures of their fundamental connection, their shared place in the great dance of life. As the music reached a crescendo, Zuri felt a gentle tug on her spirit. She looked up to see figures shimmering in the moonlight. The ancestors, the guardians of the past, smiling down at her. They were calling her to join them, to take her place in the great circle of life. With a peaceful smile, Zuri closed her eyes for the last time, her spirit merging with the rhythm that pulsed through the land. She had completed her journey. had seen the dawn of a new era of harmony and understanding. And as the music played on, as humans and animals danced together under the vast African sky, a new chapter in the story of the savannah began. The drums of destiny had fulfilled their purpose, bridging the gap between past and future, between human and nature, between the earthly and the divine. Ermani, now the new keeper of the rhythms, looked up at the star-filled sky, feeling the weight of her grandmother's legacy and the promise of the future. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, that maintaining this harmony would require constant effort and understanding. But she also knew that as long as the drums played, as long as people remembered to listen to the heartbeat of the earth, there was hope. And so, the story of the drums of the savannah continued, its rhythm echoing across the plains, through the hearts of all who heard it, a testament to the enduring power of wisdom, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all living things.